just to give you an idea of me kind of getting context of where I'm at, thank goodness I'm close to neighbors again, because in the last 3 days I've gone 3,000 miles. And I was in Tyrrell 1 minute, Marble Falls the next minute, back to Dallas the next minute, Garland the next minute, and I was in Allen, Texas this morning for breakfast, and this has all happened in the last 48 hours. Wow. A little different. Now when I finish with you, I want to go home tonight, tell my wife I love her and miss her, and then I've got to go to Colorado City in West Texas, a 7-hour drive by 1 o'clock tomorrow. Oh. So, it's all fun. It's all fun. Okay, so yeah, my name is Dwayne Stovall. I'm running for United States Senate for the position currently held by John Cornyn. Those of you that don't know, I ran in 2014 and pulled almost 11% of the primary on about $70,000. I live right over here in Liberty County. My wife and I live in Tarkington Prairie outside of Cleveland. It's an unincorporated area. My youngest is here. We've been married almost 29 years. And we've got 3 children. You'll hear me talk tonight, and I want to set a disclaimer on this talk that I don't hate attorneys. Okay, because we're going to talk a lot about that. I want you to understand I don't hate attorneys. It takes good attorneys to fight bad attorneys. I think everybody in the room would probably agree that the problem is for every good attorney, there's like thousands of bad attorneys. I say this because we've been in business for 25 years, almost 25 years, and in the course of my adult life, I've raised Cain about 2 professions, lawyers and bankers. And my oldest is my daughter, and she's a lawyer, and my oldest son is a banker. The government that we live under today doesn't even remotely resemble the government that was created in the Constitution. Right. It doesn't remotely resemble what the states agreed to. It couldn't be further from it. I mean, it really couldn't. And early on in this little pathway, because of my own family history and because of my feelings towards the Lone Star State, I developed an affinity for the U.S. Senate position. And that is because the U.S. Senate position has one charge, one responsibility that no other office in the federal government has. And that is, it is charged with protecting the best interest of the state, period. It starts and stops with that discussion. They don't come at it from a what's good for the union. Today they don't. They look at it as the nation with a capital N. We're not a union. So, to give you more context as to why I'm here, my family's been here since it was Mexico. I come from a heritage of people who were Texian, who fought for Texas independence. We have a very deeply rooted genetic leaning towards the state of Texas, and that's a big driver too in this situation. I've done presentations all over the country, and a big part of the country, on federalism and the original construct of the Constitution. And I ask groups all the time, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. It doesn't matter whether I'm in California or whether I'm in Oklahoma or in Texas or whatever. I'll start out a conversation with the group and I'll ask them, do you live in the United States of America, in the free and independent state of Texas? Simple question. Do you? Most people will nod yes. See, everybody in here thinks it's a trick question, so they're holding it. It's not a trick question. That's the construct that we're supposed to live under. But I'll tell everybody, let me rephrase the question and listen to the language I use and let that soak for a second. Or do we live in the United States, singular, of America, in the county of Texas? There's not a state in the union that manages its own affairs. We're supposed to be free and independent states. We're not. We are part of a monolithic nation state. Everything you and I will talk about today has to do with the progressive era. Every single aspect of it. This is all post-Lincoln progressive. The whole idea of progressivism is built around collectivism. Whether you believe in socialism or communism or Stalinist or whatever you want to be, it's all built around collectivism. We are ate up with it today. Ate up with it. And I mean Christians, I mean Republicans, I mean conservatives, I mean libertarians. We're ate up with it. Democrats love it. They eat it up anyway. Republicans are ate up with it and they don't think they are. How many times have you ever said we're all Americans first? That's a progressive ideology. That is the idea that we're going to homogenize ourselves into 330 million people who are going to share the same identity. Think about that for a minute. How is that possible? It's not. Now I'm going to say something that a lot of people kind of take issue with, especially if you're not from Texas, but in context, disclaimer aside, meaning we need to secure the border yesterday. That's a non-issue. That needs to be secured yesterday. But that aside, I'm a Texan. I live in the state of Texas. I'm a citizen of Texas. And I know culturally, historically, logistically, morally, traditionally, this state shares exponentially more in common with the people of Mexico than they'll ever share with the people of Maine or Vermont or Connecticut. They don't come here for lobster. You know what I'm saying? We have Tex-Mex for a reason. We are missing the boat because we are allowing ourselves to fall into this trap of this homogenized identity. I'm a Texan first. You'll see everything about this campaign is hyper-Texas-centric. Hyper-Texas-centric. If we can turn up the Texas a little bit, we'll do it every day. It's because of this office. It's because it's what it's charged to do. And it has a lot to do with the respect aspect of the other states and how they manage their affairs, which is how we manage ours. Look at where we are today. We've allowed our Congress basically off the hook completely. Completely. No one even talks about their behavior. We scream at them a lot. But they're like nothing to anybody. There's just somebody we'd like to throw darts at. Our focus is on what? It's on that king. For 40 years, we've gotten more and more intensely desiring of a king. So every few years, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum, you are begging for a king. Those of you that are on the Christian right, you see the king as the ultimate arbiter of being able to choose the judge that's going to overturn our past and fix our sin. It doesn't work that way. So what I'm going to share with you is what I learned that got me to this point. And that is that when you're in school, remember I said, well, I read the Constitution, I don't know something. I took the same civics class most of you did. We didn't learn anything. If you ask a 17-year-old or a 75-year-old, it makes no difference. If you ask them, explain the construct of the federal government. They go, oh, well, there's 3 branches, and they're co-equal. That's the first lie they teach you in school. They're not co-equal. We're never designed to be co-equal. No one ever said they were co-equal. That's a modern progressive spin on checks and balances. So if you ask a 17-year-old or a 75-year-old, who does the Supreme Court answer to? Who does the Supreme Court answer to? I'm asking you, do you ever think about that? If you ask a group, they're going to say nobody. 99 times out of 100, I've done this so many times. I've done this hundreds of times with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. It's nobody. Well, 16 years ago, I said nobody. Here's the scary part. They literally answered to Congress. End of story answered to Congress. Like very limited form answered to Congress. Back when they created the judicial branch in Philadelphia, they had no power at all. Zero. If you read the words of the people the right hate, like Hamilton, because he's the big government guy, fine. If you read his words, he says any layman's reading of the document shows you that the judicial branch is the weakest of all the branches. It has no mechanism of enforcement and no mechanism of self-defense. Nothing. They just talk. But he also said that if you ever allowed that branch to coalesce with either or both of the other 2 branches, everyone's liberty would be in danger. Hello? Linda, listen to me, Linda. This is where we're at. We've allowed 9 unelected, well-connected lawyers and robes to supplant everything from God to every aspect of your life. It doesn't matter. They control everything in our lives. They dictate to us. It's kind of, I look at it this way. If I were to describe the government we have today, we have one all-powerful king. We have one parliament of 535 individuals who have no power whatsoever. And both those bodies are protected by an army of 9 unelected, well-connected lawyers. That's kind of the construct of what we have today in literal terms. So when you see somebody in Congress today, they'll just knead their hands and furrow their brow and tell that Supreme Court's supposed to give us a ruling this Friday. And I'm at a point now where I just hammer them if they say that. You know why? If you were to read, not to get all civics on everybody, but when we're in school, they teach you that Article 1 is written for the legislative branch, and Article 2 is written for the executive branch, and Article 3 is written for the judicial branch. But that's a lie. Article 1 is written for the legislative branch, Article 2 is written for the executive branch, Article 3 was written for the legislative branch. So if you ever get tired or bored or something, you want to back up what I'm saying, or check it out, break out your little pocket Constitution, flip to Article 3. It's really small. It's one of the smallest articles in the Constitution, if not the smallest. And read it as if you're a member of Congress. It says there's going to be, it makes a statement to the effect of the Supreme Court twice. It says there's going to be one. It could be one judge. Because it says all other courts, all lower courts are under the purview of Congress, whether they exist, how many there are, if they exist or not, all up to the Congress. It also says that they're going to have original jurisdiction over 3 types of cases, and it lists them. If you look at the entire list, and it's a list, folks, there's about 10 types of cases that they have any jurisdiction over at all. 10. So the 3 that they have original jurisdiction over, that means they own them. You can file, if you want to file a suit against an ambassador of the United States, you can go straight to the Supreme Court. You don't have to go to your DA. But there's 7 other types of cases, and they're listed. If you look at the list in there, it's ambassador, semicolon, maritime, semicolon, ministers and consuls, semicolon. It's a fixed list. There's no language in there that says, oh, and by the way, any other type of case they want to take up. Defining marriage, forcing us to accept government subsidized abortion, right? So why is that so important? Because in the Constitution, in black and white, it very plainly says that those 7 types of cases are what they call appellate jurisdiction. An appellate jurisdiction under the Constitution falls to what rules and regulations is put forward by Congress. Why is that so important? Because we don't read it. And we've allowed ourselves to get so far away from the responsibilities of those in Congress that we now think that the way you get rid of scourges on society, like abortion, is that you just pick a king. And he gives you that special judge. And somewhere, somehow, in the history of this union, we're going to have judges that overturn judges, which is almost unheard of. Kind of like asking the bully that beats you up every day and takes your money to have an epiphany at home and scold themselves and just change their mind. Doesn't work. Doesn't work that way. So when you're dealing with someone who understands the authority of the office and the limitations of the office, and you understand how this is supposed to work, you can become pretty angry if you think about this long enough. Because you know how you get rid of things like Roe v. Wade? One person in either chamber can go to the microphone and say, check, yeah, folks, we don't have the authority in the Constitution to force 330 million citizens across 50 different sovereign states to subsidize the murder of children. So as of today, we're going to remand the issue of abortion back to the states and remove any and all perceived jurisdiction from the federal judiciary. And it's gone. And then guess what happens? Then Texans are free to discuss that issue among ourselves and manage that issue according to our moral values and traditions. And what the people in New York choose to do is on them, not on us. You follow me?
Yeah.
This is how this is supposed to work. Now, you can use Article 3 authority on just about every kind of social issue you can think of, because there's no social issues in the Constitution for the federal government to be involved in. None, whether you like it or not. Now, this is very, very important to our life with each other, because to me, this has more to do with respecting your individual states and the way the people of the individual states want to behave and having them respect each other. This is the idea that, folks, we're not wearing pink hats and running around DC and screaming into a television camera because of foreign policy. We're not screaming into the television camera because we're trying to fight 7 different wars at one time undeclared. Wish we were, but we're not. We're not fighting over trade agreements. Nobody's screaming at each other. That level of animosity and vitriol and sometimes open hatred that you see elevated on television every day, that's brought around by social issues. Social. And it's brought around because we have centralized so much power in the hands of so few people, and we're so bought into it, so many generations down the road, that we all see things through the optics of the Supreme Court. Everybody in here knows that the entire society sees things through the idea of the Supreme Court being the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. They teach it in school. When your kid gets out of high school, they think the final arbiter of everything lawful is the Supreme Court. They think that anything the federal government does is supreme. These are all lies that we've been taught for decades. It's not true, and it doesn't have to be that way. So when you start, it took me 10 years of self-study to convince myself that what I was reading was correct. Because I kept wanting to say, no, the Supreme Court can overrule that. No, they can't. The Supreme Court has a very, very limited nature. Very. People will say, why don't they do that? And I'll get into that with you. They have done it. I'm going to explain to you why they don't do it now, but they have done it. The question has been asked, and all of us have asked this over breakfast at one time. When did we get off the rails? When did we leave the Constitution? When did they get away from the Constitution? And people will point to everything from FDR to Wilson to every single aspect of 1913. It literally took 4 years for them to start getting off the rails. They implemented the Constitution in 1789. In 1793, there was a private lawsuit. Oh, listen to this. Those 3 types of cases that the Supreme Court owns jurisdiction over: ambassadors, ministers, and consuls. And the last one is cases in which a state shall be a party. Now today, in our layman view, we look at that and we think, well, that's anything in which state shall be a party. In the origins of the Constitution, it was not that. And they knew what it meant. So this is how it's supposed to work through Congress. They implemented it in 1789. 1794, there's a private lawsuit called Chisholm v. Georgia. The South Carolinian sues the state of Georgia over a private estate. It's a private lawsuit. Well, it's got Georgia involved in it. So I don't know if the Supreme Court was just bored or what, but they got involved. Except that you have a Congress who is that close to the Revolution, that close to Philadelphia, that close to the state ratification debates. They don't need or want a overly educated constitutional lawyer leaning over their shoulder explaining to them, this is what this means. They know what it means. They were there in the agreement. And they told that sitting Supreme Court to shut up and sit down, and they wrote the 11th Amendment. So if you go read the 11th Amendment, it's the first one after the Bill of Rights. It says, cases in which a state shall be a party is not to be misconstrued to include this. That's Congress. That's how they control the Supreme Court. Now, the reason we don't do that today, everybody can have an opinion, but I'll give you my best guess. What is the primary profession that runs Congress?
Lawyers.
Look at that, that's high-five. It's funny, that's never been answered different. I've done this, I don't know how many times. We are dealing with, as I stated earlier, this progressive outcome. And we're so deeply into it that even those of us who are conservative-minded don't really realize how deep we are in it ourselves. We've got 100 years of case method training in the legal profession. Every single year for over a century now, you have a brand new crop of case method trained attorneys. Case method being, they are taught what we live by today, which is stare decisis, what we all call case precedent. Okay? So when you go to law school, every state in the union requires that a law student has to take at least one semester of con law. So when they take, a few hours of con law, they come out and they automatically go home and tell their family they're constitutional expert. The problem is, it's almost nothing about the Constitution and all about law. We don't live by the Constitution, so let's clear the air there. The Union does not run by the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't do anything to seriously limit the government anyway. What we live by are a body of case rules, judges' rules. You have this development over the last century where you have children, young people that get out of high school who believe the Supreme Court's final arbiter. They go into college and they're reaffirmed that. They get that lower degree, their undergrad, and then the ones that want to go to law, then they get branded with it. They're completely saturated with it. When they get out of law school, by and large, the vast majority of them believe the Supreme Court's final arbiter, everything all the time, everywhere. It doesn't really matter what's in the Constitution or what Article 3 says. Because their professor told them this and they got their law degree, they're experts. So what do you end up with? You end up with a body of legislature, 2 chambers that act like one today, and they all defer all of their authority to these 9 unelected, well-connected lawyers that they generally all ascribe to be. Right? Now, I've had people tell me, well, my congressman's not an attorney. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I tell this story, this is how it works. And I don't know if I've ever done this before. You know the question, what happens to them? Every single person in this room that's above 25 has asked that question. What happens to them? We get him elected. I thought that was a good guy. He goes there. Good Lord, he gets ended up with power or corruption or whatever. It's not that. They're still good people. I figured that out. If you go to West Texas and find a 30,000-acre cotton farm that's got a stalwart of the community that owns it, he's 65 years old, he's a ball of joy, everybody trusts him, he'll give you the shirt off his back, he's the greatest person you'll ever meet, he's got great kids, his fruit's wonderful, the whole 9 yards. And the whole community comes behind him and they say, look, you got the character we want. We want you representing us. We've had all these dogs, we want you, you've got the character, we all trust you. And he's so good, he doesn't even want to do it. He's like, that's not for me. You don't want me. And they force him to. And they work on his behalf, and overwhelmingly that district elects this stalwart of the community. He flies to D.C., steps off the plane, he steps foot on the compound. Who's the first person he gets? That's the second one. The first one he gets is legal counsel, legislative counsel. Sometimes it's their chief of staff, but they've got to have legislative counsel. Now, there's a known quantity. You have legislative counsel. There's somebody between 28 or 30, maybe lower 40s, upper 40s. They've been experienced with numerous other incumbents. Maybe they've worked in both chambers. They know everybody on the staffs of everybody. These staffs flip from elected official to elected official like crazy. And they take your ball of joy and they grab him by the sleeve and they say, here's the bathroom. Here's the main chamber, here's your office, here's the committee rooms, this is our lunchroom, and I'll show you around town and we'll show you where we eat. And he goes through a little parliamentary training and he's with this person every day and they build a little rapport. And they're down there for a few weeks and then there comes that day where they're sitting there having lunch. He's got a rapport with this young attorney and he says, hey, look, my constituents and I have this issue. And he knows in here it's right. He knows it's righteous. And he pushes it out there. And he says, we'd like to do something about that right there. Doesn't matter what the issue is. And that's when it starts happening. He says, man, you're so right. You're so right. We really need to do something about that. But the Supreme Court has ruled on areas around this for many years. They're never going to take it up. They'll never rule on that. They'll never support that. And he pushes it back and says, I've read the Constitution. I don't see where they can do that. I really want to try and do something with this. And counsel says, I agree with you. This is absolutely righteous. And we really should do something about it. I tell you what we're going to do. You and me, we're going to craft legislation to move the court in our direction. We're going to work around the edges, and we're going to try and get the court to move in our direction. 50 years of Roe v. Wade, maybe, something like that. You see how that works? What you need is you need someone in office who understands the authorities and the limits of it. Who, when they get that, they say, yeah, they work for me. They don't have the authority to do this, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to remand the issue of abortion back to the states. And tomorrow we're going to remand the issue of defining marriage back to the states. And the next day we're going to pick something else. But this is what we're going to do. And to do this, I'm not saying you go there and you immediately get these people on board, but so much is done in the darkness of a committee hearing. I think these discussions are discussions that need to be had with us. If I were saying to you, if I were saying to 1 million people at one time what I'm telling you now, because what I'm telling you is absolute truth, and they were to check it out, if you were to get people motivated in mass, to raise the heat on all these people that are in D.C., to make them understand that we're Texans. And we don't necessarily agree with what they want to do in Connecticut about an issue, but we don't want to disrespect the people of Connecticut managing that issue. We just demand that we respect ourselves, and they respect us as well, and we share that. And then you fall back to that general idea of federalism that I always preach about, and that is that we've destroyed the idea of freedom of assembly. If a state shares your ideology enough, you'll pick up and move there. Right now, we're dealing with this national monolithic nation state. We're trying to make everyone live under the same rules. Look at how we vote. It's a red versus blue paradigm. We all know that. Doesn't even matter what you say. I'm running against a guy who's a complete liar, and he's not even close to being a Republican. But they elect him perpetually because he wears the right jersey. But every few years, it's like the Super Bowl. We just got to elect enough of our guys who wear our jersey and get them into offices of power in the national government because we need to manage the lives of all 330 million people according to our will. And it's not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to have powers as Madison sold the document in New York and in Virginia. The states were supposed to have powers that were numerous and indefinite. The federal government is supposed to have powers that were literally few and defined. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't think it's had ultimate power over everything all the time, everywhere now? My idea is the federal government is too large. And the only answer we have is divesting of the power. And I think Article 3 is the real pathway to doing this. I think the idea of giving the states back some of their sovereignty as much as possible, giving the citizens of the state more skin in the game to make the decisions for themselves is the only way to go about this. Because right now, we're centralizing power at an astronomical rate. And that leads to really bad places. So the guy I'm running against is a nationalist. He sees everything through the optics of the nation. He represents the nation. He's written articles where he says he is a representative of this nation. If you hear me say anything about the nation, you can assume that I'm talking about Texas. Okay? It's a good guess. You'll be right 100% of the time. There are distinct differences between a personality like mine and what I want to do with that office versus the one that's been in office for almost 2 decades. And those are these. I have a firm, hard-edged belief that there are certain core values that we hold that are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. I come from a background where if you say you're fighting for me and I don't see blood on your lip, I think you're lying. The idea of fighting for you. No, you're not. When you're sitting down with Dianne Feinstein to negotiate smart infringements on my right to bear arms, you're not fighting for me. When you're going with Beto, yes, Beto, to work on crafting legislation that basically undermines the wall, you're not working for me. You're not fighting for my end. So for almost 2 decades, I've watched this guy very, very closely. I got in 2013 to run for that 2014 cycle simply because early on in my own pathway of education, I got hooked on this position and I started monitoring him way closer than any human being should. And I can tell you that it's the same story over and over and over. It is a broken record. For almost 2 decades, it's been the same thing. When and if you ever hear the man talk, which is so rare, if you ever hear him talk, if he ever makes his way to a podium, it's a very canned position. It's the same one every time. It doesn't matter what the issue is. And it's all red versus blue. And it's all those dirty Democrats. It's the Democrats. They want to grow the debt. They want to grow the government. They want to grow the spending. They want to fund Planned Parenthood. They want to give it unconstitutional authorities. And everybody claps and goes home. Except that if you watch him, he leaves the podium and consistently goes to the floor and votes with the Democrats to grow the debt, to grow the government, to grow the spending, to fund Planned Parenthood, to give it unconstitutional powers to manage your phone and your emails and collect every bit of electronic data you have against your will, to spy on law-abiding citizens. That's this man's position. I can't go there. I don't do servitude well, so I'm one of these that you have 2 choices. You either engage and you try to figure out a way to punch the bully as hard as you can and see where it goes, or you just take it. I don't take it well. That's how you get somebody like me in front of you. Now, I don't know if y'all have heard a story like this before or heard anybody speak like this before, but if you have, tell me who it is, because I'm going to give them money and work for them. For the last 15 years of my life, I wanted to hear what you're hearing me say today, and I've never heard it from anybody. Never. If I had, I wouldn't be here. But I'm here. So I'm going to tell you that we've got the largest campaign in the state. We've got somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 volunteers. It's massive. People do this out of the care of their heart. They come at this with a free heart. There's nobody coming at this because they have some kind of agenda other than the fact they want to protect the best interest of Texas and protect conservative values. It's been very, very special this time. The trend is changing. I can tell you that the positive of this is it can happen. It can absolutely happen. When I ran in 2013, about 80 to 85% of the county chairs would not talk to me at all. They stiff-arm me and they stayed as far from me as they possibly can. By the way, if you think of the equal time thing, you hear about, well, if they give that guy time, they've got to give the other candidates time. That's for media. There's only one organization in the state of Texas that has a rule that stands by that, and that's the Federation of Republican Women. The Republican Party does it out of a courtesy. They don't have to hear you. So I could call them all day, all night in 2013, and they could say, no thanks, and they did. This time, it flipped. Now we've got a scheduling coordinator or a volunteer coordinator in South Texas. I got a scheduler in Lubbock. She's piled on with people who want to talk. It's amazing the difference. You're never going to see John Cornyn release a public polling that's independent, because independent polling has him in the tank. If polling says anything, he is going to have a very, very hard time anywhere, be it primary or any other. If he makes his way through the primary, I can see him losing the November election in a heartbeat. But it's so bad. And his handlers have got to keep him distant from me. Me specifically, because I have a history and I did pull double digits, and we have a ground group. I'm actually the keynote speaker at a large multi-county Lincoln dinner coming up, and he's RSVP'd to it. And I've already told the person who's handling it that he's not going to show. No, he told us he's coming. No, he can't. He can't come. He can't legitimize somebody like me, because you put me in front of him on a stage anywhere, he'll never make it through the primary, even close. But they can't risk that. But that's okay, because we've got a groundwork. We have got a program going right now. We're raising money for radio ads. We got to put radio ads out starting the end of this month, early February. And believe it or not, radio ads got really expensive over the last 6 years. They quadrupled. You know what 60 seconds cost today? $500. $500. So when you hear these guys running a 60-second ad 4, 5, 6 times a day, they're ringing up the dollars. We won't be doing that. John Cornyn's got $10 million in the bank, and I'm going to tell him a running joke. I was asked by Robert Pratt up in the Panhandle. We've got Michael Berry, and they got Mark Davis in Dallas. Robert Pratt's up in Pratt on Texas. He's up in the Panhandle. He says, so Dwayne, how do you explain pulling double digits in a primary in a state as large as Texas with only $70,000? And I said, well, simple. If you tell the truth, people know you're telling the truth, and they accept it. And the light comes on, they stick. They'll take it with them. They don't leave. I said, but it costs millions and millions of dollars to make a mule look like a secretariat. And that's the truth. That's politics 101 right there. I want to take a minute. If y'all got any questions or anything, throw them at me. Hopefully y'all kind of get the gist of how I got here in front of you. If there's anything I missed or you want to talk about, please let me know. Is there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How do you counter that President Trump has already endorsed Cornyn?
Well, here, it's kind of like I said in this room a couple of months ago when Steve Ministerio was here. Donald Trump is the key negotiator. He negotiates. So when they were first trying to get funding for the wall, and they had a majority in the House at that time, I believe, Cornyn voted against it. So as they got closer to election time, it became really apparent to all of Cornyn's people and anybody that wants to get elected that they've got to have his blessing. So they negotiated, and he voted for the last wall funding that was never going to happen because you had a House that was going to vote against it anyway. So that funding never parlayed out, but he got a vote in on his behalf. So that whole negotiating tactic of Donald Trump is, you want my endorsement, you're going to vote for what I want, and he voted for what he wanted. What Texans need to know is that all of John Cornyn's campaign circles around one purpose. They have to tie him as close to Donald Trump as they possibly can in the last few weeks of this campaign cycle to make it look like he's all about Trump. What they are banking on is that Texans are somehow too stupid to see through the charade. I'm banking on the fact that they're not. I'm banking on the fact that we've got almost 2 decades of him being a senior member of the swamp. So it kind of plays into what do you actually believe Texans are going to do? And there's a lot of data here. When we ran in 2014, there was about 1.3 million that voted in the primary. When we had the Beto effect in 2018 with Ted Cruz, where everybody was supposed to be so emotionally charged, you know how many voted in the primary? About 1.4 million. When Trump ran in 2016, Trump brought an extra 1.2 million, 1.3 million to the primary. Now I'm banking on this. That 1.2 million or 3, these people hate the establishment. They were voting for a middle finger to the establishment. I'm banking on them to come back. I also believe that we all know that in 2016 Texans chose Donald Trump almost 1 million votes here. And we chose him based on 2 promises he made the whole time he was campaigning for Texans. And that was to build a wall to secure the border and to drain the swamp. I think there's not a Texan alive today that doesn't know without a doubt that John Cornyn is a senior member of that swamp. So.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna so on the Center of Disease Control, they did a study that shows in the last decade there's been a 76% increase in teen suicide from ages 10 to 24. I was wondering what you would do from a Republican viewpoint to help maybe bring education more into schools and around the community and stuff.
I think the best way to do that is to destroy the Department of Education.
Yes.
I'm going to give y'all, and I know I'm hammering y'all with a whole bunch of stuff here, but there's a comparison, an analogy I use when I'm talking with people about education. And I want to put your brain in the right framework. If you were to leave the United States, forget our stuff right now for a minute. If you were to leave the United States and you were to go to Belgium and the Netherlands, and you tie them together, there's about 30 million people, it's about the size of Texas, right? What if you told the parents of every single school-age child, K through 12, in those 2 countries, that every aspect of their daily educational needs are going to be met by a few hundred people in Poland? Would they go for it? What if there's a few hundred people in Germany or Belarus? What if you told them that everything about their daily educational needs, their curriculum, what they ate, what time they go, how often they go, was controlled by a few hundred people in Moscow? Okay, that would never happen. They would be on their tables, on the streets, they would be burning buildings down over that. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. We are 150 miles farther from DC and Austin than they are from Moscow. And we live with that every single day. We have the daily educational needs not met of over 50 million students K through 12 across 50 different supposedly free and independent states by a few hundred people they're never going to know and never influence. 1,000 miles away from them, sometimes 3,000 miles away from them. It doesn't work. It literally can't work. And the idea is we get up every day and we think, well, they just tweak this a little bit, tweak that. No, what we need to do is shut it down, maintain the funding for a limited amount of years to the states and give them so much time before they realize they're not going to get that funding anymore. Get rid of all the people involved in the Department of Education and relinquish that back to the states and get that over with. Nobody knows your kids like you do. And the idea that they're going to control those serious, serious aspects of our lives from that far away is just insane to me.
Didn't Donald Trump remind that said about
Trump's an interesting guy. He's not a constitutionalist, and she wanted to know if Donald Trump is in line with that thinking. It's hard to tell because he kind of he's like an alpha male who's been in business so long, accepting responsibility for everything so long that it doesn't matter what they throw at him, he wants to carry it. And I want somebody in his ear who's going to advise him on how to divest himself of some of these things and stop playing the part of the king. If we want to treat you like a king, stop being treated like a king. Start telling people, I'll talk to you about health care all day, but it doesn't have anything to do with my office. You want to talk about taxes? That's fine. Doesn't have anything to do with me. You really need to talk to your congressman. But see, right now, you live in a society today, we live in a society today where they can stump their toe in San Jose and point the finger at Donald Trump and go, it's his fault.
Right.
Because, you know, we got this king thing going on. I'd like to break that cycle and burn it and smash it.
Come on.
Yeah. You want to hear what I like to do when I get into office? Very first act?
Yes.
Everybody wants to know, what are you going to do? There's something I can do by myself. It doesn't require the whole chamber. There is a question I want to answer. As a Texan, it's a very selfish question. I'm not going to lie to you. And some of you will agree. I don't know if any of you will disagree. I want to know, I want the answers to the question, will there ever be a time in which the federal government gives up even 1 ounce of authority that is taken? Well, everybody says no. Everybody says no. They always do. The problem with that is that we don't vote like we know it. Because if I were to come into any group, and I've done this a billion times, or maybe hundreds of times, if I come into a group and I say, man, if we just elected enough R's, couldn't we change our path? And no problem. And if I come back 5 minutes later and I say, hey, look, in all seriousness, in your bone marrow and your heart of hearts, do you ever think there will ever be a simple majority of those that hold offices in the federal government who will make the decisions necessary to correct our path? And it will be silent. And I'll say, folks, this is what you're dealing with. A minute ago I said if we just chose enough R's, we'd be great. That's what you hope to be true. And then I ask you in all seriousness, do you think it'll ever happen? And you say nothing. That's what you know to be true. We don't vote what we know to be true. We vote what we hope to be true. When you go there, you're just, hold that over. It's worse than a slot machine. I want to answer that question, and you can. If you combine what I'm telling you about Article 3, you get somebody like me elected, you go there, the very first thing you do is take up the biggest scourge we have that they have no authority to be involved in, and that's abortion. And you go to 99 of their offices. And I go sit down with Bernie Sanders, and I say, Bernie, we're going to remand the issue of abortion back to the states, and we're going to remove any and all perceived jurisdiction from the federal judiciary, and you're going to support this bill because I'm going to get you elected for however many years you've got left to live. Because you're going to go back to Vermont, you're going to get in front of 10,000 of your most ardent socialist supporters, and you're going to tell them you're going to support this bill because you want your fellow citizens in Vermont to manage this issue according to their will, and you want to make absolutely certain nobody looks like that Texan tries to influence how you do it. And I'm going to do that 99 times, 99, not 98. And I'm going to document every single one of them. And I'm going to come back to Texas, and I'm going to ask the sitting lieutenant governor for a meeting of the whole in the main chamber of the state capitol. I'm going to get in front of 182 of our legislature, and I'm going to say one of two things. I'm either going to say there is light at the end of the tunnel, that I have posed this question to these individuals, this is how they responded. I know now that we have a simple majority who are willing to remand this issue back to the state so that we Texans and you representatives can manage this issue according to our moral value. Or, sadly, more likely, I'm going to come back and say, I posed this question to the chamber. I spoke to 99 other members. These are the answers I've recovered. It's documented right here for you to watch and see. I can tell you now with all certainty, with absolute matter of fact, that there will never come a time when they're willing to give up even 1 ounce of authority to we Texans or any other state. They're going to keep the boot on the throat of Texans for the rest of our lives and forevermore. What do you want me to do? I want to do that yesterday. Now, I don't want to start guessing what our state legislature would do. But I'm just going to tell you, I need that question answered. Because folks, centralizing power is what's killing us. There's a way to get this done. I believe it. It's just going to take talking to everyone in mass, not talking to people in private committees. Appreciate y'all coming out there. Yes, sir.